Kyrie Irving is finally playing home games, and they got to stop depending on Kevin Durant to make all the big shots. You brought Kyrie Irving there to be one of your big shooting guards. Kyrie Irving, since he's come back, he's played, 20 games, 25 games. He's averaging 27 points. He's averaging 5 rebounds, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. He's averaging pretty much his totals that he usually scores when he's on his game. But in the big games where you need Kyrie Irving to score, he just disappears. Now, I know he hasn't played a full season. I know he's missed a significant amount of games with the Nets. But to me, Kyrie Irving is the most important piece to this team if they have any chance of winning. Now, Seth Curry, the addition of him and the rebounding that they've added, they got to figure out how to get Ben Simmons on the court. Because if Ben Simmons is not on the court, they're not beating anybody. Ben Simmons is the reason why you traded James Harden. If you knew Ben Simmons was not going to play this year, you should have never made that trade. You had a chance to win a championship with James Harden. If James Harden's on the court right now with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, nobody beats them. But right now, Sean Marks looks like an idiot because Ben Simmons is still sitting on the bench. He's not providing anything, any assistance defensively, offensively, except hogging up the bench, wearing his Louis Vuitton sweaters or whatever the hell he's wearing, and doing absolutely nothing for a team that made a trade to bring him in to be a big piece to this puzzle.
Yeah, Kyrie Irving so far made 3 home games in his return. First one against the Hornets, 16 points, 11 assists, so I had a double-double in that one. And then 24 points, 4 rebounds, and 25 and 5 so far. So his stat lines at the Barclays Center so far have been good, so that's encouraging. It's just a matter of, yes, can he do it in a more consistent clip because he's been missing so many times this year. So whether they can get into a rhythm or not is another question, where Kyrie Irving being that by far second option with Ben Simmons not there, with all these other veterans that are washed up on this Nets team and lacking now the depth that they had in even some previous years. They traded Landry Shamet. Joe Harris is now out for the year. Now, granted, Joe Harris didn't show up in the playoffs either last year, but still, these are still quality depth pieces. Now you're relying on who is your third option? An older Blake Griffin? Patty Mills? It's not going to help. So Kyrie Irving has to get back to that dynamic form because Kevin Durant, like you were saying, you can't rely on him to be the wear and tear type guy and just carry you.
Showed in the playoffs last year.
Like he did in the playoffs last year, like we've seen LeBron James do for many different playoffs, where he was really the only guy scoring for a lot.
Kevin Durant isn't LeBron James. It's not even close.
No, I don't think he is either. But the point is, the wear and tear for one player is the reference I'm getting at with that, and that doesn't always win. LeBron James is the exception to the rule when it comes to that. He's a freak of nature.
He really is. When it comes to the playoffs, if LA makes the playoffs, and right now they're a borderline playoff team, they're out of the playoffs. It's crazy. San Antonio is 1 game ahead of them.
Yeah, and the Pelicans got hot. They surpassed them too.
Yeah, it's crazy. But if somehow Los Angeles sneaks in as the final seed, which I believe they still will, I still think, how many games are left? 15 games?
Playoffs start in 2 weeks, so it's probably in the 15s.
If Los Angeles wins the majority of their games left, they're going to make the playoffs. And if they make the playoffs, watch out for LeBron James. They've lost 4 games in a row. If LA was making the playoffs, I think the MVP is LeBron James.
Right.
Okay, he's been sensational. It's not LeBron James' fault that they're not winning.
No, they're not playing defense.
They're not playing defense. Anthony Davis is not Anthony Davis anymore. Or in the offseason, you have to look to move Anthony Davis.
Yep.
You have to. LeBron James has already come out and said that when his son comes to the NBA, he's leaving. So you know he's not staying in there in LA. So trade LeBron or trade Anthony Davis or trade this team and rebuild. You won your championship. Russell Westbrook's gone next year.
Yeah.
Russ has not had a good season. If you look at 18-7-7 not to be a good season, then that's a pretty good season.
For his standards, it's not.
No.
And for his contract, it's more what they're looking at. But anyone blaming LeBron for this Lakers season?
No.
No, you cannot do that. He's having a fantastic season. He was on his historically good
38-6. His numbers are probably the best of his career.
And the best by far of anybody of that age. And that says a lot. So you cannot blame LeBron James. But going back to the Nets, because Kevin Durant now might have to take down that kind of load, and he is not playoff LeBron James. He's not close to playoff LeBron James. He still was great last year, but still, that's not going to bode well for a team that is right now the number 8 seed. Right now, actually tied with the Hawks and the Hornets for 8, 9, and 10. So they could have all fall even further. The Nets right now are the coldest of those 3 teams. Atlanta's streaking in like they did last year right at the end of the season. The Hornets have played a lot better than the Nets have down the stretch. So we'll see if Kyrie Irving can make that leap and push for them to get that home game.
It's crazy. It really is. And as far as the Knicks are concerned, Julius Randle needs to stop complaining. When you score 5 points in a game and you have rookies outplaying you, like Grimes scoring more points in a game or Quigley scoring more points in a game, there's a problem. You were an all-star last year. You got a lot of money in the offseason. Yes, you took less money. It benefited the Knicks to sign you. But you have been nothing but a disaster to this team this year. You have hurt this team's growth, the young players' growth. R.J. Barrett, the only good thing about this is we've seen R.J. Barrett take over for this team. He is the leader of this team. He is the best player on this team now. And he will be the most consistent player moving forward. And he will draw veteran superstars to come and play with him the way he has played. So there is a sign of goodness coming from R.J. Barrett. The badness here is that you have a guy that got overpaid, who got a big contract, where you're going to have to try to move in the offseason, where he was at his highest point in the offseason. Now he's at his lowest point. What are you going to get for him? That's going to be the question. Maybe you trade him to the Lakers for an Anthony Davis in a package. That wouldn't be so bad. Julius Randle, Quigley, and somebody else. Maybe 3 firsts for Anthony Davis. You bring Anthony Davis to play with R.J. Barrett. I mean, that wouldn't be so bad. He already said that he would come and play in New York. And then you got your 2 superstars, and you could build around those pieces. But the question is, what do the Knicks do in the offseason? Number 1 is build around R.J. Barrett. Number 2, trade Julius Randle. And number 3, decide what you're doing with Tom Thibodeau.
Yeah, Julius Randle continues to diminish his value and the team value when he's on the court because, one, the Knicks have been a lot better defensively since he's played less minutes throughout. For a defense that was struggling for much of the beginning of the season, I attribute a lot of that to Mike Woodson taking the Indiana job because he was a great defensive coach there too. But still, there were many reasons for that. But Julius Randle, not a good defensive player, and his value is not there. So they're hanging tough and beating good teams with their defense like they did last year, now since he's playing less games. So that's number 1. And number 2, why are there so many more games where the Knicks have 6 different double-digit scores, 7 different double-digit scores, when Julius Randle is less of a factor because he's not hockeying the ball? And the most notable example come in a win against the Bulls, where R.J. Barrett was leading the way, Emmanuel Quigley, Obi Toppin, Alec Burks had a great game, and Julius Randle is not happy that the Knicks won. Says something about him, and unfortunately for the Knicks also says a lot about his trade value too, because if you have a young team that maybe wants to take that next leap, are you going to want somebody like Julius Randle who's not good with young players? That's going to be hard. So that limits his market too, in addition to obviously his performance dropping his trade value from last year as he was a candidate for comeback player of the year.
As far as New York hockey is concerned, well, we know what the Islanders are this year. The Islanders are not a playoff team. We saw what Lou Lamoriello did. He extended Zach Parise. He extended Clutterbuck. He expects this team to be at full force next season. This is a Stanley Cup contending team. A lot of people picked this team to be the Stanley Cup contending team before the season started. They fell apart because they didn't have any home games in the first month because the new stadium in the USB Arena is being built. And then the whole COVID-19 situation where they lost 10 or 11 games in a row, it definitely affected them in the race in the Eastern Conference. But I expect this team to be back there. If you look at the second half, ever since the All-Star break, they have one of the best records in the Eastern Conference. They have a young goaltender in Sorokin that looks like he's going to be a star. Before he got hurt against the Lightning, he was very impressive throughout the season. And they've got pieces. They've got good young players. The Pellet contract, the Pulak contract, you have them for the next 7-8 years. They got to find somebody to play with Barzal. They really do, because Barzal, he looks fantastic when he skates with the puck. It looks like the puck sticks to his stick. The problem with him is he doesn't finish. He's not a finisher. And the reason why he doesn't finish is because he doesn't have anybody there to take the pressure off him so he can finish. So the offseason is so very important. I think they have about $12.5, $13 million to spend. Lou Lamoriello needs to find himself a big-time star. Find a guy that's going to play with Barzal, that's going to be able to keep up with Barzal and snipe what Barzal's going to give him. Filip Forsberg is a guy that is going to be available. Gaudreau is going to be available. These guys are going to want between $8 and $10 million. If you have that money, all the other guys are signed. Bring these guys in. Bring one of them in. If you put a Gaudreau with a Barzal, you have one of the fastest lines in the league. That's what they need to do. It needs to be a smart move by Lou Lamoriello, because going into next season, if you bring in a Gaudreau and a Filip Forsberg, you're going to be one of the favorites to win the whole thing.
Yeah, Gaudreau's definitely going to be up in that $10 million range because he's still very young, too. He's been durable throughout his career. Forsberg's been a little more injury-prone, so I don't know if he's going to warrant that kind of money, but still is a very good player. A guy that can play center, a guy that can play wing.
He's going to get at least $8 million.
I would say he's in the $8 million range. It depends on how they manage the money, but I trust Lou Lamoriello to do that because of the way he managed the money last year. He was able to get rid of almost all those bad contracts last year, was able to clear the cap space they did is a miracle. Now they have $13 $13 million. They still could trade Varlamov, and they've restructured a lot of the other contracts, gotten the rest of the players stable, still getting them to play well with each other. And they've played better in the second half of the season so far. They didn't have the big winning streak that was going to propel them to the playoffs, but they've played steadily good, and they're playing pesky spoilers to a lot of these Eastern Conference teams. So it shows that the Islanders at least have that identity of themselves back, because even the last few years, the Islanders weren't the regular season powerhouse. They were a 4 seed last year. They were a 3 seed when they beat the Penguins. So the Islanders were never thought of like the Lightning or a team like that was always going to have these President's Trophy accumulating type seasons. So there's going to be plenty of options out there too. And new players will emerge too. There's a lot of Western Conference teams that are older that maybe a veteran winger could come available for the Islanders from a team like the Ducks or a team like the Sharks. Vancouver's been trying to trade off assets too. So maybe they get a second guy as well and maybe at a bargain. So the Islanders have a lot of management to make that kind of thing work, but they definitely have to prioritize one of those young superstars for sure, especially somebody as fast as Gaudreau should definitely be priority number one, even at $10 million.
They need to look at who's going to fill in that position to help Barzal out and take the pressure off him. They have not reached Barzal's greatness because of it. I think it's affected what this kid is going to turn. And a lot of people put Barzal down. He holds the puck too long. He's too fancy with the puck. It's very hard for a guy that wants to be a goal scorer to be able to get to the net when you're getting double teamed and they're keeping you away from the net and they're forechecking you. So hopefully the Islanders take something the way the Rangers have played this year on their forechecking and the weapons that they have and give Barzal a weapon that he can grow with. Anders Lee is a great player, no question that he is, but he's a big man. That's all he is. He's a big man that stands in front of that. Dino Ciccarelli, he wasn't a big man. He was a small man, but he was a mean player in front of the net. He would block the goalie's view, screen the goaltender, and he was mean. Anders Lee, he's not a mean player, but he's not a nice player, but he's a big, strong guy.
He's a tough guy, yeah.
Yeah, he's going to get in front of the net and he's going to deflect pucks. You need a guy that's a finesse player, a speed guy that's going to stick with Barzal, help Barzal, forecheck with Barzal, compete with Barzal on the ice. If you find a player like that who could stipe and put the puck in the net, watch that this line will turn out to be one of the best lines in all of the NHL. As far as the Rangers are concerned, they need to get their goaltending back intact. Igor Shesterkin is a fantastic goalie, one of the best goalies in the NHL this year. He's going to be up for a Vezina Trophy. Everybody thinks it was a sure thing for him, but the last couple of games, he hasn't looked good. And going into the playoffs where it's right around the corner, he needs to be at his sharpest, because if he's not at his sharpest game and he's going into the playoffs, he could be knocked out very, very easy early into the playoffs. If you match up with Pittsburgh, you do not want to play Sidney Crosby or Malkin in an early round where these guys can score and throw you off your dial and where you expect to be. The Rangers are the better team against Pittsburgh. There's no question that they are. But if you have a weak goaltender or a goaltender that doesn't have the confidence, watch out.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning considering the results, not necessarily for the wins and losses, but for some of the struggles that Shesterkin has had against these weaker opponents. Buffalo, earlier in the week, they won the game, but they allowed 4 goals. Detroit, 5-4, another one, and the Islanders yesterday.
But they're not a weak team. They're
not a weak team, but they're not.
They shouldn't have been there.
No, they're not a weak team, but they're not the offensive juggernaut, though, is what I'm saying. And Shesterkin, for a guy that's a Vezina Trophy candidate, you would expect him to play better in those instances. But again, the Rangers are still winning amidst all that, which I guess is a good sign, but it's still, they shouldn't be struggling the way they have against these weaker teams. And 5-4 overtime games against the Sabres and the Red Wings, definitely not ideal. They had a bad dud against the Devils a few weeks back, so it's definitely not helping that the Rangers are struggling, especially with their depth that they should have with the trade deadline coming through. They should be struggling against worse teams. Now, the trade deadline acquisitions themselves have actually played well. Andrew Kopp's played very well since he's come to the Rangers. Frank Vetrano already has 5 goals, which has been impressive. Justin Braun hasn't played much. He's only played in the 1 game so far because he was dealing with an injury, but we'll see how they work into that. But still, as a collective whole, the Rangers still have to get that kind of chemistry back, because you want that home series against the Penguins. They're right now 1 point up. Both of them have played the same amount of games. Both have 13 games left, and the Rangers have played better at home this season, 22-7-3. So you definitely want that kind of thing against the Penguins team, because playing in Pittsburgh in the playoffs is going to be tough.